Welcome to the Meeple Syrup Show. I don't know if I'm doing a mime or not. I think we're having, as always, a little bit of technical difficulties, but we like it that way because we're the Meeple Syrup Show. So, welcome to, what episode are we on? Because I usually use that front screen.
592.
I think 19 or 20.
We're on 20.
This is 20.
This
the
is
big
20.
2-0.
Yeah,
Oh,
sorry.
this is
I don't know. The
fantastic.
audio wasn't going.
That's
The audio feed didn't go. Sorry.
Oh, well. Well, I mean, one of our hopes is to make this show so much better that these kind of things won't happen. And Sen's going to tell us a little bit about that.
Right now, I just totally throw me under the bus. Okay, so we are going to be starting a Kickstarter campaign for the underwhelmingly technically difficult Meeple Syrup Show in order to make it a better show for you, our viewers. We want to have more guests, do more live feeds, do all sorts of stuff for the people who are out there watching the show, and to do so we need your support. So hopefully in a little while you'll see a bunch of our logos flying around the place in terms of supporter badges for a Kickstarter campaign. We have a bunch of really cool tiers set up that we hope will entice you guys to support. Really, I mean, we just need a little bit to cover our expenses for now, and then anything else past that will go towards bigger and better things, such as coverage at Gen Con, coverage at Origins, coverage at really quite exclusive events like the Gathering of Friends, all sorts of stuff. And if we raise like an extraordinary amount of money, we're throwing a convention where everybody who backs us can come for free. Not the plane flights or anything, just the ticket entry. Anyway.
Oh, man. That would be amazing if we could cover like even one plane ticket. It would have to be the shortest distance. We could have a contest if we reach that amount that we'll cover one person's flight.
Don't quote him on that.
You're going to have to actually offer exploding kittens to be able to raise that amount.
True.
Yeah, pretty
Exploding
much.
kittens. Oh, that's depressing. On a happy note, I'm going up to Kingston this coming weekend with another Canadian designer, Yves Tournier, and we're going to the grand opening of Strategies Board Game Cafe. I'm very excited about hanging out with Yves and launching, being part of this exciting launch. And then I'm also giving a shout out because the following weekend I'm actually headed to Unpub 5.
Yeah.
I'm very excited about going to Unpub, seeing all the fun action. We actually have Daryl Lauder going to be on the episode next week to tell us more about Unpub, so I'm actually not going to say too much about it because we'll have lots of questions for him. But I'm curious, Dylan, have you been playing any games in the last few weeks?
Short answer, yes. However, you probably wanted to know what games I was playing. I've been playing Machikoro even more, and I even got the Harbor expansion, which I haven't for some reason gotten my children to play. But by gum, they're going to play it, and I still don't know why my son keeps on winning this bloody game.
He's just better than you.
He just really is.
He is, and you know, there's part of me that absolutely adores that. As a father, you really want your son to just kind of grow and blossom and be greater than you, and then there's the other part that just wants to beat his ass. Anyway, I'll go over to Sen before I say something indignant.
What have I been playing lately? I've been playing Brian Yu's Geiste Schatzmeister, and I can't find the box of it.
I can't even pronounce basic last names, and you just show me up like that.
Oh, sorry. I'm sure some German person is going to say that is not how you pronounce that game. Anyway, it's like Pandemic and Forbidden Desert and Forbidden Island got together and had a baby that could be played by children with really cool components, like amazing components. They're little rubber ghosts that are fluorescent green, and then these translucent red haunts that are like translucent red. Translucent red plastic, and the little figures all have backpacks that you can put stuff in. And I think it's out in the hall because we took it to the cafe to play, and the boys loved it and thought it was great. And it's got roll and move mechanics, which are nice and accessible for the young kids, but there's some strategic depth to it in terms of decision making, where you're going, what you're doing. So really, I mean, it's a great game for kids to play with. So we do talk a lot about playing games with kids on the show. I think just because that's who Dylan and I tend to play a lot of our games with.
Being a dad,
so played a lot of that, and I've been playing a lot of Summoner Wars by Colby Dosh and Plaid Hat Games a lot. Ethan cleaned his room, got some new factions for that, so he's been really happy with that game too. How about you, Daryl? What have you been playing lately?
I played some Acrotiri.
Oh, that game.
I realize that sounds like a lame plug, but it is one of my favorite two-player games. So I did get some action there. I played Camel Up. Again, it just makes me laugh. And then I just heard, I think it was today, with Bored with Life, they announced on their news show, which is awesome, by the way. People should watch that. They mentioned that there's going to be a Camel Up expansion, and I wrote it down. It's called Super Cup, which just makes me laugh. Like they're just leaning into the up or cup. Like, is it Camel Cup? Is it Camel Up? Now it's going to be Camel Up Super Cup. Oh, that's just... Oh, I gotta own that just so I can say that over and over again. And it lets up to 10 players play because you need more players.
Do you think that's all it's gonna do? Obviously, I hope not.
No, there's a whole bunch of other things, but I just think that's the funniest, that it adds more players.
Cool. Which is great for tonight, really.
Exactly, that's what you see what I'm
doing?
We have
what you're dropping.
We have a few people on that have some games that play more than a couple people, so I'm hoping we'll get to talk a little bit about scaling games and games that play with different player counts. So I'm going to invite onto the show Ted Alspach with Bazir Games and Evan Derrick,
the
designer of Dark Moon.
Hello. There's Evan.
I'm gonna jump right to Evan. Because Evan is a fantastic artist, and I had no idea he was a designer, which shows a little bit of my ignorance. But also,
thanks, Daryl.
I have to apologize on air because I always heard people talk about Battlestar Galactica Express, this like amazing print-and-play game, and I've known you now for a few years, and I had no idea that was you. So,
yeah, I remember we were at that convention, and you walked by my table, and I was like, "You want to play my prototype?"
Yeah, right.
Right. Ignored me and walked right on.
So tell our viewers a little bit about your game. How did it become? Like, start with Battlestar Galactica Express. Was that just like a personal challenge, or what? How did you go there?
Yeah, I love Battlestar Galactica, and some of my favorite games are the whole stab your friend in the back and betray them at the best possible time. And I love the idea of taking a game and adding dice to it and calling it Express, trying to boil down. That was my first time designing, and that just was a simpler way to approach it for me, was to take an existing game and see if I could make a light version of it. And so that's what I did. It's kind of, the main thing is that it's an inversion. In Battlestar Galactica, you have those little skill cards, and you have to put them in to a pile, and then they're all revealed, and some of them are bad and some of them are good, but it's all secret, and so no one knows who stuck what in there. So you kind of look around the table and wonder who stuck which cards in. My game's different, and then it has dice, and you roll them behind your screen, and so you have to publicly submit, which means that everybody sees the terrible number you put in, but nobody knows what you rolled behind your screen. So my game actually requires a lot better acting ability. You have to, which is a plus. It's a pro and a con. So yeah, I did that, and it got a little popular, and then I sold it to a publisher who had it for 1.5 years, and he didn't do anything with it, and I got it back from him, and then Stephen Bonacore from Stronghold. You guys don't know anything about stuff like that, right?
Oh, no,
nothing at all.
Never. We will definitely be picking your brain a little bit about that experience, but I'm going to pass it actually to Dylan. Dylan, why don't you ask Ted, get the party started over there?
Well, I kind of just wanted to say, in as deep and profound a voice as I can, Ted Alspach, the name whose voice rings like thunder, who, of course, is known by many a man across the globe for not only fancy comics, but very, very interesting games. Why don't you tell us, just set the scene for us here, Ted. You are this kind of paragon of gaming virtue, one who can excel in so many different types of media. Just give us a little 30-second TED right now. I can't even ask an admirable enough question to come to your level of dignity.
So, I'm totally hiring you to do intros for me.
That was like totally WWE.
I didn't even know what to say. It would pale in comparison to that intro. So. No, I've been designing games for a long time now. Most people used to know me because I designed Age of Steam expansions. That was like the thing that I did long time ago.
Right.
Not that long ago, I guess, like 4 or 5 years ago. I guess I stopped. But did a lot of those, and of course, Ultimate Werewolf has been around for a while, and more recently, Suburbia, Castles of Mad King Ludwig, and then One Night, Ultimate Werewolf last year, which turned to be much more successful than I would have expected, which I'm extremely pleased with. And then the follow-up, Daybreak, which just came out. In fact, I was just, right before this, I was out in the garage stuffing envelopes with Kickstarter copies of Daybreak. And I still have, I don't know how many hundred more to do. So
It just sort of takes over all the space, eh?
It does for a week or two, yeah.
We'll try not to keep you up too late.
Yeah. We'll let you get back to your stuffing soon. Evan, going back to you, sir. Oh, I just have to give Evan credit, by the way, for one of the best But Wait, There's More pitches ever. He had reclining pants, and he somehow made it work and made the whole table just explode in laughter. So, Evan Derrick, thumbs up to you, my friend.
Thank you.
Excellent pitch. We're talking today about scaling games for multiple players. Did Dark Moon start out at 3 to 7, or did you have to kind of bring that up?
No, it was 3. I mean, when it was a print and play, it was 3 to 5.
Right, that's what I thought.
That just made sense at the time. But then, honestly, I wish I could say I did something brilliant and genius to knock it up to 7.
Did you really just add more dice?
I just added more dice and more people, and
that just solves everything.
It didn't break. So it got up to 7 and didn't break. So, aren't you glad you had me on the show for where I can expound upon how you add more players to games?
This is awesome. This is practical and profound all at the same time.
Just add more players, and if your game still works, you did it.
The proof is in the pudding. There you go.
On that note, I was supposed to pass on a message from Stephen Bonacure, who was on earlier on Nerd Nighters. We like to refer to Nerd Nighters as the Tonight Show, and we are the late night show. And he actually has a message for you, Ted. He said that Werewolf sucks. which then
anyone before, no gamer has ever said that about Werewolf.
Which then he quickly clarified that it is one of his only games that he actually rated a 10, and he loves Werewolf. So,
Sounds like Steven.
So I had to pass that on. But very exciting time. We were talking about adding players. Obviously, big news right now. Suburbia being a top 50 game, and you just announced that there's going to be a 5th player expansion. So could you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, sure. So originally, the original version of Suburbia, we were working on it with 5 players, and I was trying 5 players. There were problems. There were all sorts of problems. Eventually, scaling it back to 4 solved most of those issues. One of the big issues with 5 players with the original Suburbia game is that you could never buy the stuff that you saw come out right after your turn. So stuff slowly makes its way down, and most of the time the good stuff would come out. You'd see it right after your turn. You're like, I'm never gonna get that, and that was really frustrating. So that was one thing. And then just there's a long time between turns, typically 4 people in between turns. In any game that there's a little bit of thinking and stuff going on there, you don't want to wait 5 minutes before it's your time to play again. So trying to solve that was probably the biggest issue. And Suburbia 5-Star solves it in 2 ways. So one thing that we've done is we've added just one extra slot on that marketplace board, so you have one more tile, so less chance things will go away. That fairly easy fix and doesn't increase the complexity too much. But the big thing was changing to variable turn order. So in the original game, it's just clockwise. In Suburbia 5-Star, if you play with that, you're going to have variable turn order based on the star track, which is kind of like the turn order track in Macau and games like that, where you can decide to invest in turn order, basically, and move yourself ahead so you can go first and have a better selection, or even set yourself up to go maybe twice in a row. If you were going last the previous round, you can set yourself up to jump ahead, go first the next round, so you get 2 turns in a row, which provides all sorts of interesting tactical options that you probably didn't have before. And doing that keeps everyone very engaged, because you're never quite sure where you're going to end up in turn order when it's not your turn. So you're watching other players, not only for what they're purchasing, but also for how they're going to move ahead and where you're going to be in turn order.
That's really cool.
That added a lot to the game.
Yes, sounds like it would.
That's exciting.
Evan, I have to say I'm disappointed. Not only for the fact that you don't have a beard, but also for the fact that you're an artist and yet you submitted to the tyranny of the 2 to 5 with your initial design. Like, why? And this is going out to the millions. Like, why do we as designers submit to the tyranny of the 2 to 5? It's always 2 to 5. Why is it always 2 to 5? Why can't we have like 3 to 9? Why can't we, all that kind of stuff? Why the 2 to 5? Why did you target that player number?
Oh, that's an easy question. 2 to 5 is simply marketing. 2 to 5 sells the best. Hopefully Ted will agree with me. If you put 2 on the box, say, oh, I want a 2-player game, I'll buy that. And if someone sees it and they say, I want a 5-player game, I'll buy that, you've reached a wider demographic. So you're somewhat statistically assured that you'll sell more copies with 2 to 5.
That is true.
But did you start with it? Did you start with that as a constraint?
No, it started out with 3 to 5, actually, because in a trader game, 2 people just wouldn't work very well.
Yes, exactly.
That would kind of be a really crappy trader game.
Are you the trader?
Oh, I'm the trader. Oh, yeah.
Game over.
So 3 still doesn't work great. Like, as a designer, like if I was super ethical and like really loyal to my design, I wouldn't even put 3 on there necessarily. It works with 3, but 3 isn't ideal. So I think you find that a lot with hit and roll or trader games. Players will often find a preferred player count. You often hear people say Battlestar Galactica is best with 5. People won't play it with 6. Some people refuse to play it with 4 or 6 and will only ever play it with 5. So,
yeah. Do you think that's something? This is a question to Ted. Do you think that idea that Evan just had, that there's a sweet spot, is something that publishers should actually put on the box somewhere, that this plays really well at these numbers, but really, really well at this particular number? I mean, are you shooting yourself in the foot, or are you just being honest?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, the thing with Suburbia, we go back to that. We could have made it for 5 players. It worked. It wasn't like it didn't work. It was still functional. It just wasn't as good of a game. The gameplay was not good, and so yeah, we might have sold a few more copies initially, but I bet you whatever the BGG average would be much lower, because people would be like, it sucks with 5. Play 2 to 4, play 3 to 4, or whatever it is that people like about it. So I think that's actually more important, unless you're just in there for the quick Kickstarter sell of the game, and then you put whatever numbers you want to, and people buy it, and whatever they get stuck with, too bad.
But we don't care about BGG ratings, do we? I mean, really? I mean,
I've heard ratings on BGG.
Wow, you guys are saints.
I don't peruse them on a weekly or even daily basis by any means whatsoever.
I don't either. I ignore. I don't immediately scroll to the very end and look at the 0 and the little red comments. I never look at those. Nope.
Those are the awesome ones. The people who rate it a 1 and then they give these really great reasons why it's, well, according to BGG what a 1 is, but it's enlightening. It really is.
We should do, note to self, a whole episode on like therapy. Or like
designer therapy.
Not look at designer therapy.
Just
like
designers don't read their one-rating comments.
Yeah, don't hit that last button on the ratings.
Oh, have you ever seen that on like I can't remember which show did it where famous people will read tweets about them.
It's like the Tonight Show, like Jimmy Fallon or something.
Yeah, it's like Jimmy Fallon. Yeah, we should do that. Designers read their zeros.
Designers read their zero.
We could read the. That'd be so good.
That's a fantastic idea.
That will be more.
If you want, I'll do it tonight.
I want to do it tonight too.
That'll be extra content for Kickstarter, right?
Yeah.
So, I have an audience question for Evan, and I just want to mention to anyone who's new or doesn't know the process, if you're interested and you're watching live, you can either watch on YouTube and join the chat, the conversation, really interesting conversation going on over there about Dylan's beard, or you can, if you're on Twitter, you can send us a tweet or hashtag MeepleSyrup with your question, and I'll try to include it in the show. If not in the show, then we'll get them during the after show. We'll talk about it. But this question is from one of our favorite viewers. Can you guess who it is, Dylan?
Could it possibly be Suze?
It's Suze. And Suze is wondering, Evan, curious about, like, does a designer feel pressure for a wide player count, or maybe even more specifically, and I like this kind of rephrase she asked, what are the risks to designing a game with a specific player count?
As in, I designed a game that only plays 3 people?
Sure.
And it can only be played with 3 people? Well, I think the risk with that would be trying to sell it to a publisher. I can only think, didn't Victory Point Games do a 3-player game recently?
Yeah, they did Triced.
Yes, that's right.
So, but honestly, I can't think of any other significant publisher that has done that other than 2. 2 would work. So if you were to design a game that only fits 5 players, I think the risk would be that you and your friends would be playing it, and you would probably never be able to sell it. I could be wrong about that. Maybe you can. Challenge accepted.
There you go. April 11th, Eric. It's Devin Eric.
All right.
Evan Derrick. April 11th is coming up, where we'll meet you guys in Niagara Falls. We hope to see a 3-player only game.
Oh, I'm gonna go up. I'll do a 5-player only game.
Nice.
All right.
I like.
Gauntlet has been thrown. All right.
Gathering, Ralph Anderson debuted his Chimera game, which is 3 players only.
Yes.
That is true. Yes. Yep,
Yes.
Chimera is, and so is
that. So I know Z-Man's kind of irrelevant, but still they published it. So.
Well, Ted, I have a question. Would you ever publish a game just at 3 or 4 players?
I think if it's a really good game, yeah. I think if it's an awesome game, yes. Yeah, I don't think that would be a limitation. I think it would have to be a much better game than the typical one that works for 2 to 4. It would have to be really, really, really solid. There's a lot of games that are 3 to 4 players that are only those counts. Settlers is a great example of that. It's 3 to 4. I mean, everybody wants to play it in 5 and 6. It sucks like that if you have the expansion. But and it sells. So I think if it's a really good game, yeah, sure.
I'm gonna say it's really hard. Like number 3 is a really tough number to build a game for, and so like you play trump or like trick-taking games like 953 or whatever it is. I used to play that a heck of a lot. But it's really tough to build for 3, so like Haggis is really good for 3. But I wanted to go back to Ted, specifically on your experience with Werewolf, because obviously, like, this is a game where I've played Werewolf with 25, 30 people, and like it works, right? It works for some strange reason. So why is there this magical 2 to 5 number on most published games, and yet some games completely and totally work, kicking sand in the face of the 2 to 5 rule?
Well, I think with Werewolf, it's a different type of game. I mean, and certainly there's certainly some crossover between the Werewolf players and the traditional Euro or traditional American style games. but it's not as much. It's definitely especially Eurogamers will look down their nose at Werewolf. It's just not their kind of game. It's too much of a party game for them. Even though they may play regular party games, that's something that they will not play. So I think it is a different type of game. You could not have 25 people around the table moving pieces. It just, you've got issues. Right now, even with one of the reasons that one night we have it 3 to 10 players, we stopped at 10, not because it doesn't work with 11 and 12. It actually works. We tested with 11 and 12. The big problem we had is people could not reach the center of the table to move cards and look at cards. And that's ridiculous, but it was one of those things where it just didn't. Even with 10, it's tough, but it can work.
Yes. So when I play with up to 8 because my arms are really short. So
we always have the people with little arms with the T-Rex arms. We have them sit in the middle of the table.
I always get stuck farther away, and I'm like, oh, now I'm gonna be noisier.
Evan, let's talk about consideration. So when we're designing games for a high player count, what do you think in the back of your head are the design considerations and constraints that sort of overarch that whole I'm designing for lots of players? What are you thinking about when you're doing that?
I think probably the most thing is not, like Ted mentioned with Suburbia, making sure there isn't enough downtime between turns. So usually for high player count games, sequential turns are usually death.
Yeah.
It really has to be simultaneously play of some sort, and there are very few either simultaneously play or wildly complex games where you can sit for an hour while other people take your turns and you still haven't figured out what you do. There are war games like that. Avalon Hill's Old Civilization, Magic Realm. If you want to design a game like that, you can stick as many people as you want because it can take 5 hours for everybody to take their turn. You still haven't figured out everything you could do. So I think definitely most high count games, especially gamer games, need to have some kind of simultaneous play. So like you see that in Seven Wonders. Seven Wonders works really well because it's only as slow as the slowest person because everybody's playing at the same time.
Good point. Daryl, are you next, sir?
Yeah, well, there's some great chat going on. A few other games that we didn't mention that have specific counts. One was the new game Witness from Yastari. I haven't got to play that, but that's
no, me either.
But it's designed for 4 players.
Ooh.
So almost the Evan challenge, but not quite, because he's going 5. And then another shout out was FFG just came out with Last Banquet, which is for 6 to 25 people. So I haven't tried that, but again, thank you to our viewers for just being so knowledgeable. I love it. So I got to come back though to Ted. You design these party games that the Euro snobs are too good for, but then you also design these like meaty Euro style games on the other side with like Castles, a Mad King Ludwig, and Suburbia. What kind of designer are you? You seem to be all over the map.
I mean, I'm just designing games I want to play. I think that's the thing. I like party games. I like social deduction games. I mean, I love Resistance. I love Werewolf. I love Coup. Pretty much the whole range of those games across the board. They're fun. I really like the idea. I don't like when it gets into too much busy work. I think Shadows over Camelot to me feels it's maybe a traitor, but there's so much busy work that you're doing that doesn't really feel like the important part of the game is figuring out who the traitor is in that game and then beating them. And to get to that point seems like a lot of work. And a lot of the more recent games we're seeing people are actively engaged with the potential traitors or the bad guys or the teams that they're with. So I like that. I love Euro games. Kalis is probably one of my favorite games of all time, and that's about as hardcore, straight-up Euros you can get. That, El Grande, those sorts of games, absolutely love those. That comes more naturally to me because I just like those anyway. So that's kind of, I think, where the design stuff ends up is what I like to play anyway.
Absolutely. Well, I'm finding that
I'll never sell, so yeah.
I'm finding that whatever games, Ted, you make are games that I love. At Gathering, Castles and Mad King was my favorite game that I played.
Yeah.
And it was awesome. It was so much fun. The interaction in that game, the bidding, the building your own thing. It clicked for me on every level. I loved it. And so I'm just finding you're one of my go-to designers. That I really enjoy what you do. And you mentioning El Grande, I also want to give a plug because I heard that the 20th anniversary copy is coming out sometime soon, and so I'm very excited. El Grande is one of my all-time favorite games, so I have to give a shout-out to people. Track that down if you don't already have that in your collection. So, Dylan, to you.
Dude, Evan, I gotta call you out. Because
again?
You're being self-deprecating is what you're being.
Am I?
You just said you added a bunch of dice to your game and it just kind of worked. But the fact is, it's got to change somehow. I'm not going to let you get away with that. You tell me about how that thing changed. You tell me about how that feeling changed. I want to know.
It basically the reason why the time of the time frame of the game is set. It is almost about 60 minutes. There's a clock on the game, and the clock is exactly the same if you're playing with 3 people, 5 people, or 7 people. So adding more people doesn't really extend the length of the game too much. Awesome. But it does mean that people get less turns. So what happens in a 7-player game is that the traders they have to be much smarter and much faster and be able to strike at just the right time. So it is a harder game for the traders at 7 because they have fewer turns with which to destroy things.
Cool.
So that's how it changed. Dylan.
I see. The more I hear, the more I like you, Evan.
Tad, let's talk about actually going the opposite direction in terms of not player count. So we've talked a little bit about higher player counts and what we want to look at there. Have you designed any specifically 2-player games or solo games?
I've designed them. I don't think there's anything I've published. I mean, there's solo variants for Castles and Suburbia and Subdivision, a bunch of things that we've worked on. But no, I don't think there's anything that has been published. Oh, that's not true. So one of the first games I got published was called Seismic. Atlas Games published it.
Okay.
It was a 2-player game, and they decided it would work okay for up to 4 players. And I was like, yeah, it was one of those things like Suburbia, like, yeah, it works, but it's kind of sucky. And they're like, nah, but it'll never sell if it's just a 2-player game. And they're probably right, but it's all even worse because it was 2 to 4, because then people played it at 3 and 4, because people a lot of times will play the max number.
Yeah.
And this sucks, and it's random. And as a 2-player game, there's like some really interesting things in interaction. So initially it was a 2-player game, but it got changed into a 4-player game. Oh, actually, yeah, solo and 2-player for Age of Steam maps.
Right.
A bunch of those, but bunch of those specifically for that. There's a lot of requests for 2-player maps of Age of Steam.
So, how did your design process change, and what decisions are you taking into account when you're thinking 2 players, or even better, solo? How does that change your design?
Usually solo is the last thing. Solo is, how do I capture the feeling of a multiplayer game in a solo experience? I think in Suburbia we did 2 different things on there. We actually have a bot that kind of has basically a series of things that he does in priority order, which is okay, but it's a little bit of work. Castles, I think it's fun building a castle in a solo game, but you're missing the master builder mechanic, the actual setting the prices, because there was no way we could figure out a way to do that, to automate it.
And that's the best part of that game, to be blunt.
Yeah, and so that's it's fine for learning the game. You learn the mechanics that way, and 1 or 2 games, but I don't think it's a very compelling experience. So yeah, really, for a solo game, it's capturing the feel of the multiplayer experience. And then I think for just a 2-player version of the game, it's playtesting. It's seeing, okay, what do we have to do to make it work? And ideally, there's very little changes. I want to do as few changes as possible between 2 and 4 players, or 2 and 5 players. And for Suburbia and Castles, it's like the number of tiles is the main change between.
Right.
I had a question.
Sure, go ahead.
For you designer guys, which is all of us, so that was kind of redundant. Have you ever been pressured by a publisher to expand your player count or reduce it beyond what you thought was good for the game?
100%.
And if so, how did you handle that?
Oh, I'll go. So Akrotiri right now, which is doing pretty well in the two-player market, was originally a five-player game. And Daryl will remember. Daryl playtested it when it was a five-player game, and it was an actually really good five-player game. But Sophie at Z-Man, which sounds funny if you know the history of Z-Man, it's usually Zev at Z-Man, but Sophie said she would not publish it unless it was a two-player game because she doesn't like downtime, and there was too much downtime with with more than two players. And at first, Jay and I were like, we liked it at 4 or 5, but at the time it was I think like maybe our third or fourth game that we'd ever signed, and we really just kind of wanted to get in with Z-Man so that we could build the relationship. And so we said, yeah, okay, let's do that. And it's amazing because I taught it at Festival Ludique in Montreal like 20 or 30 times in a row, and I could not have done it for 4 to 5 players 20 or 30 times in a row, not just in time, but just in all the questions that would get asked and the complexity of the interaction of players. When it's just 2 people and they know what they're doing, it's such a faster game. So I think in that case it was a good decision. In Belfort, we were asked to make a 2-player variant, and it's funny because it's very polarizing, the 2-player option in Belfort. It's much like Ted was saying about the player bot. We have a bot that runs 2 colors out of the 4, so it's kind of like a 4-player experience, but it's really not. If you get into the 2-player version of Belfort and figure out, oh, when I switch my player order, then I get to control the second color or a different color that I was controlling before of the bot colors, and I can dump them in different areas for area control. It's super interesting, but a lot of people don't play to that depth level, so it's a much more strategic game at 2 players than it is at 3, 4, 5. And actually, my sweet spot for Belfort is 2 and 4. I rarely play with 5, and 3 is too open for me, so it's 2 and 4 for me that make that game.
I would love to see this town ain't big enough for the 24 of us. Right? That would have been really cool. Just add a few more tiles and you're set.
Yeah.
I am a big fan of Belfort 2-player, and it's a totally different experience. I'll share a couple of quick examples. With Walled City, I was really excited about 5-player. Area control in general, like El Grande, 5-player is like, I love 5-player El Grande. So I was really excited, but with Mercury, they were really set on, they wanted to keep the cost of production of pieces down, so they wanted to keep it to 4 players, and if it's successful, then they would actually have bits and a chance to do a 5th-player expansion, where people actually have to buy the expansion instead of just printing more maps, or, they wanted to actually give a value add where someone feels like not only am I getting more players, but I'm getting, a whole bunch of other things. So they actually held back a few things that, I'm hopeful they'll see the light of the day, but it all comes down to if people like the game. And for me, I play 5-player all the time on my own board, and I just homemade my own 5 players. And then the other, on the flip side, on a real positive, was Caffeine Rush. I remember saying to Frank, when we played it, I just showed him the 4-player, and I just said, I designed this, and it's really small on the deck, but my favorite version is with 6 players. He goes, okay, well, show me 6 players. And I show him it, and he's laughing. He's like, oh, this is hysterical. He's like, well, we have to do that. And I went, well, it's going to change the player count, or the card count. He's like, I don't care. It's way more fun. We'll figure that out. So there's an opposite reaction where someone says, well, we'll figure out the cost, but it's so much fun. We gotta go for it, and so I'm super excited because my favorite version is playing in teams of 2 in the 6-player. So
just like a barista team.
Yes, barista teams. So I mean, there's a couple examples from me. I don't know, Ted or Dylan, do you have any want to add to Evan's question?
Go for it, Ted.
We're good. All right, well, I'm going to jump into my question then for Evan, throwing back the spotlight back on him. Because, I mean, we have 2 guests coming from different worlds. they're both designers, but then they also have other skill sets. So Ted, being a publisher, Evan is a fantastic artist, and I can attest to this because I was trying to find my love letter that has Evan's art, but because I use it so much, I did. I got one of those, which I love, and it's in my bag of games that I regularly have. But my wife's out in the car, and I always have it in the car, so I couldn't even bring it in to show my favorite version of Love Letter that features your art. But could you tell us a little bit about the artist side of making prototypes and design? How does that influence you as a designer, being an artist?
I mean, I love doing board game art. I love doing. I think it's fantastic. I think it's also really interesting because creating a beautiful but also functional board is a big challenge. And I really appreciate that challenge because oftentimes you'll have boards that are too beautiful to be functional, and sometimes you'll have boards that are so functional you just your eyes are bleeding just looking at the thing. And so there's somewhere in between that's I think really exciting to try to get. I like taking old games and remaking them, like old out-of-print games that you can't get anymore, and just kind of giving them a fresh paint of coat. I think that's a lot of fun, and I've spent hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours doing stuff that I then give away for free, which is probably kind of insane. But yeah, I love doing board game art, but I don't think I want to get paid to do it anymore because in my day job I deal with clients all day long, and the last thing I want to do is deal with clients, even lovely board game clients, in my free time. So now I'm just going to do it for myself and my own games.
Cool.
Yeah, I think from the other side, dealing with artists is kind of one of the biggest pain in the asses that there is. Yeah, and I have, yeah.
I totally support that statement.
It's just one of those things that there's a few cases where they're awesome, they're on time, they're really good working with the guy who did the cover art for Castles. He's doing the cover art for another game that's coming out, and if I were to be doing an expansion to Castles, he'd be doing the cover to that too, but that's not announced. We don't talk about unannounced games. But anyway, this guy's an awesome artist. He does great stuff, and he's on time, and he interacts with me constantly, and it's a great relationship. There's other artists that I ping like, hey, think I'm going to see this anytime soon, and nothing for it. Then I have to ping them again and go, I really, really need this. How's it all going there? And then they're like, oh, that's right. It was due, wasn't it? And I'm like, ah. So that's painful to have to be following up with artists constantly, whether or sketches or final art or whatever.
Yeah. I'm unfortunately one of those artists. So
Guilty as charged.
I should publicly apologize to Stephen Bonacore for how long it's taken me to do the art sometimes. I'm so sorry, Stephen.
He's asleep. This is too late for him. That's why he never gets on shows.
I want to go back to Ted with one of our audience questions, actually, specifically regarding following up on kind of iPad and new tech being used in games, especially when we had Eric Lang last week, who was just releasing XCOM with its iPad kind of AI.
Today, it came out today.
Today, exactly. Yeah. What do you feel about actual real silicon AI taking the place of a given player, so you could have like a 1-player to 5-player game or whatever?
I think that would be great. The biggest issue right now is that it's a limitation of its time. You've got right now the lead time for getting getting an actual game done, let alone something that works with a game, is huge. And to have that simultaneously published with the game itself, the logistics for that are crazy. For one night, I mean, it's a fairly simple app that it's running through the stuff, and I've got to do that way ahead of time because I need to be able to test it and then still tweak things before they go to print. And I just can't imagine doing what Eric has done with XCOM. That is fantastic and awesome. And even Alchemist, if you guys have played Alchemist, you see the app for that. you kind of need that app to make the game work. And so I'm like, how did they test this without that app initially? And there's a way to do it otherwise, but I don't think I'd ever want to play it that way. You kind of need to do that stuff ahead of time. So you got this really long lead time. You invested in this app, and the game might not end up being that great at that point because you won't have tested it enough with it. So totally. I think that's one of the limitations you have right there. That long development time, the simultaneous development of the app, and the board game itself. In a way, I would have loved to have my Suburbia app done before I finished Suburbia, because then I could have tweaked it some more. I could have found out some stuff and tried some different things and maybe adjust some of the prices on the tiles or whatever, and just seeing how things are, because you can set up the AI to just churn through stuff, and you can start to see patterns that way. Mm-hmm. And it'd be great to do that, but of course there's never time to do that, or you'd have to delay the release of things for a year or 9 months or something.
Interesting. Let's just jump back to Evan for a second. Evan, we were talking about communication, and sometimes being poor at it in both regards. So I mean, we get it from the publisher side. The publishers might get it from the artist and designer side. How can we work together with the publisher, seeing as we have a publisher in the hot seat today, and we have a bunch of artists and designers here today? How can we all work together better so that our projects come out, reasonably on time, without people having to ping and get really mad at each other about their communication skills? So how do we do that, Evan?
Well, from being a designer and interacting with publishers, I could say that I think on the front end, putting some kind of timed clause, if they're looking at a game, maybe you can tell me how you feel about this, Ted, but saying like, hey, you have 3 months to look at that game, not necessarily saying that, but giving them a time frame, and then if they haven't evaluated within a reasonable time frame, pinging them and taking it somewhere else. That way, that's more like, as a designer, you're protecting yourself from any publishers that aren't great at communicating. Otherwise, you just sit in that empty void of waiting and waiting and waiting and having a game get tied up for a long time and not pitching it. On the other end, as a designer and artist, I think when you do land a game with a publisher, you are interacting with them, you really need to, they're your next pitch in a way, so you really need to value that relationship and take care of it and respond to them quickly and respond to them often when they ask you questions. Otherwise, when it comes time to pitch game number 2, they're never going to want to work with you again because it was such a poor experience the first time.
Right.
Absolutely. Well, on Nerd Nighters earlier tonight, Stephen Monicure was bragging about how he scooped Travis with getting your game. So that he sat on it. He was bragged that he sat on it too long, and he was happy to scoop in. So I think that's fantastic. So I got another question from the audience. Actually, we got Aldi from BGG watching, and he's got a question here for Ted. I don't know if maybe he knows the backstory to this, and he knows it's a good question. But he said he wondered if Ted had shared about how he acquired and what the development process was like for getting One Night Werewolf.
Yeah, sure. So One Night Werewolf itself was published in Japan in early 2013? Is it 2013? 2014? Wow, I don't even remember now. Anyway, it was like a year and a half ago. It was published. And I saw it right away, and I'm friends on BGG with a couple people who get things from Japan. So I saw it, and I'm like, hey, can I get a copy of that real quick? I got a copy. It kind of bombed when we tested it. We tested it with like 4 people, and we'd watched. There was a little video that had it, and it kind of, people were like, there's only 2 or 3 different things you can do here, and so it just was in the back of my mind, like, why isn't this good? It should be this. I like this idea of possibly your role changing. That was the key thing, the difference there. And then the first thing I did was add the Troublemaker to it, because that wasn't in the original game. And then suddenly the game like kind of came alive at that point. There was all these different things you could do, and then we started adding other characters and other things, and There are a ridiculous number of roles, and only some of them have been published so far. And at that point, once we had like the 10 or 12 core roles that ended up shipping with the first edition of the game, then I was like constantly bugging the Japanese designer. I'm like, dude, you gotta, we're gonna make this is gonna be awesome. This is what we want to do. And of course, this was his first published game, so that was a giant pain in the ass because he had no idea what he was doing. And he's in Japan, he didn't speak English that well. I didn't want to feel like I was trying to take advantage of him, but at the same time, like, we got to get this out because this could be really, really good. And I work with a company that does, they're basically the folks who do the Japan brand stand at Essen.
Yep.
And they work with a lot of Americans or Europeans that are working with want to publish Japanese games, and so they're kind of the in-between people. And it was really tough. There was probably 4 months of negotiations, during which time we tested, developed. I mean, we must have play tested hundreds and hundreds of times, developed it, had the art done, had the box done, everything except we didn't have a signed contract. I think it was like the end of September before we actually had a signed contract.
Wow.
And that was really frustrating because we're like, come on, because I really wanted it for Essen. We couldn't do it for Essen that year.
Oh, right.
So we ended up doing a Kickstarter thing to ship it early to get the BGG done.
Well, if you ever want somebody to talk Japanese to Japanese people, our man right here, Dylan Kirk, is fluent. So.
Yeah.
All right.
There you go.
He had a great interview with Seiji Kanai, so we are familiar with the Japan brand.
Cool. Can I say real quick that I'm fairly
yes, you
certain.
Can.
Hold on, I'm trying to suck up to Ted a little bit.
Okay.
Suck up.
Suck up. Go ahead.
I'm fairly certain One Night Ultimate Werewolf is my most played game of all time.
For sure.
Wow.
So I think I have 150 plus plays under my belt, and that's not even with the expansion.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
I love your game, sir.
Wow, that's awesome. Wow. Well, thank you. That's fantastic. Yeah, it is now definitely my most played game. It used to be at one point it was Age of Steam and Tichu, and then I did playtesting on Dominion, and we replayed the heck out of that before it was published. That was crazy. But yeah, we've played probably more than 1,000 games total between the first game, the expansion, the theoretical expansion that I can't talk about that might be coming out later on this year. It's just constantly being played, and it is usually when I ask playtesters to play stuff, they're always like, "Do you have anything new? Anything new there to test?" That's always the thing they want, even before the other stuff. So that's kind of nice.
Ted, you said the buzzword, and I have to follow up.
Which one?
Why do you love Tichu?
Haha.
Why do I love Tichu?
Why shouldn't he love Tishu?
Yeah, it's like this sounds terrible, but it's a trick-taking game for gamers. Trick-taking game. I mean, trick-taking games are still for gamers, and yes, it's not trick-taking; it's climbing. But it has that extra level of strategy that keeps your brain, the thinking part of your brain, occupied. But at the same time, you can just kind of hang out with 3 friends and play, chat. And it's very relaxing, but it's still a very, very engaging game. There's something about it that you can be carrying a totally different conversations on at the same time and still be playing and still be playing well and doing well in the game.
Yeah.
And that's pretty rare. There aren't very many games that have that level of engagement, and that you can still carry on some other conversation or kind of hang out with people at the same time. So I think that's one of the reasons it's kind of this weird little, amalgam of strategy game and social relaxation type of game.
I take issue with your word relaxing, sir. The last time I played Tichu was at the Gathering in the tournament where I was forcibly raped. Along with Stephen Glenn. We were a team. And I had been practicing on the app, and I thought I had something, and we were just molested horribly.
You know what? We can blame Stephen for that. Stephen, it's your fault.
So, yeah.
Evan, I'd like you to tell me on the question where the Tichu man touched you.
Oh
and,
gosh, it was everywhere.
We're going to we're gonna bring a little bit of love here back. We like to talk. We're getting close to the end of the show, so I kind of wanna ask a very open-ended question. And I'm gonna preface it by saying we like to talk a lot about constraint on this show. Constraint as kind of a trigger for creativity. And so, Evan, I want to ask you about any new designs that you're working on that use player count as one of the constraints. If so, why? And if not, why not?
I have a real-time dice rolling game that I'm working on. It started out as a zombie game, but then a whole bunch of other real-time dice rolling zombie games came out, and I was like, well, crap. So I changed it, and now it is the players are movie monsters like Frankenstein and Dracula and stuff. And then there's another player who controls the angry mob. He's the mayor of the town, and he controls the mob with the pitchfork. And the players, much like in Escape, are rolling dice really quickly. And then the mayor has a timer. It's a 7-second timer, and he gets to act every 7 seconds. And so I have constrained that to 4 people max. It's 2 to 4, and I'm not going over that. And the challenge with 4 is it becomes so chaotic. I mean, if you've ever played Escape, it's wildly chaotic, and people break rules and mix stuff up all the time. But I want it to be 7. That's my constraint. Or I'm sorry, I want it to be 4. That's my constraint. But it's really challenging to get it there and manage the chaos.
All right, moving on to the last final questions of the night before we sign off. Ted, we often ask, or we always ask our guests to give one piece of advice to novice designers. So what is the one thing you wish you knew when you were first starting off on this long journey in game design?
I think I can never emphasize enough the value of self-play testing, of sitting after you've designed a game before you show it to anybody. Sit there, run through, pretend you're a bunch of different players, run through games like that before you show it to anyone else, because you're going to find so many things about the game that you're working on right away. It can be one of those things that right away that goes back on a shelf and never comes out again as a result. It could be also something that you realize, what are those things that you have to do to make it really, really good. Testing all by yourself, which sounds like a terrible, horrible loner thing to do, but boy, that is the time spent doing that pays off big time. By the time you get in front of people, it actually theoretically will work. There's things that aren't broken, and you've gotten rid of some of the really big roadblocks, and you're not going to make your playtesters cranky. So that would be the #1 thing: is spend a lot of time self-testing. Don't just think about how it's going to work, but actually, print it out, set up the pieces, whatever, move them around, go through as much of a game as you can until you either stop because it doesn't work, or until you realize, okay, I need to change this and go back and do something else, because that's huge. It takes a lot of time, but that will really, really help make designs a lot better to start with, and you can get rid of the crap sooner. You'll find out what's no good right away.
All right, Evan, back to you. What can you tell a new designer who's just about to publish his zombie dice rolling game?
Damn it, that was my idea. I would agree with Ted. Playtest as fast as you can. Don't get it. Create a copy, write on some note cards, and playtest as fast as you can. But everybody gives that advice because it really is the best piece of advice. So I will give a different piece of advice, and I will say, if you're not sure where to start and you want to design a game, do what I did. Take one of your favorite games and try to create a slightly different version of it. If it's a 3-hour game, boil it down to 1 hour. If it's a card game, try to turn it into a board game version. I don't know, maybe you love Suburbia and you want to play Suburbia the dice game. Try to design Suburbia the dice game. It's a great way to kind of stretch your design muscle without feeling like you're staring at a completely blank canvas and you have no idea what to do.
Excellent advice there. Well, our time has run out. I can't believe how fast that went. But I thank you both for being on our show. Fantastic information. I hope viewers were writing down lots of notes, and I really want to encourage people, keep an eye on both Ted and Evan and their games. If you are on Twitter, follow them, ask any questions we didn't get to. I also want to mention keep an eye on Kickstarter, and also a little heads up for our next week's episode. We have Chris Handy coming in covering for Dylan because it's episode 21, and he seems to always cover the ones. He was on episode 1, episode 11, so it's only right that he covers episode 21. And then we have, for guests, we have Steve Tassi from Snakes and Lattes, the game guru himself, and Daryl Lauder with Unpub. So, again, keep designing great games. We look forward to hearing your questions and encouraging great design. Good night.